Welcome to the Nerd Party.
They can travel anywhere in time and space.
Off we go into time and space.
So all of time and all of space is sitting out there.
Welcome to Time and Space, one married couple's adventure through the Doctor Who universe. I'm Jessica Nunn.
And I'm her mini-personality companion, Phillip Gilfus.
What is that? What are you trying to do there?
That's my other character I play.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
And what?
I wore makeup for this.
This is true, and I've told you before, stay out of my makeup. Is your other personality one that does the dishes?
Yes, apparently the only one who does in this house.
Oh, no,
Zing.
you did not.
Zing.
You take 3 steps away from that one, mister. So, while we're on this strange banter kick, I know that you did a tweet about whether or not people wanted to hear us banter.
That's
what were
true.
the results of...
Mostly pro. People like to hear hosts talk about their lives. They get invested.
Argue about who's doing the dishes
apparently.
more, yeah.
Yeah, and then one or two thought it sort of dates it. And then they also just want to hear about the topic.
Okay,
But
yeah.
the majority seem to like it.
Yeah, and both of those are fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, our lives currently revolve around the dishes, apparently. One day we're going to have a dishwasher. And
One day.
Then we won't have anything to talk about, really. That'll be fun. And then we can listen to this and be like, oh, that's so dated.
Right, exactly.
So I'm looking forward to that.
I guess I should not take for granted that we have a washing machine in the laundry room.
Yes. Well, and a dryer.
Right.
Because the majority of my time in England, we either only had a washing machine or we had a washing machine that was also a dryer, which is a trick, ladies and gentlemen, because it does a terrible job actually drying the clothes.
Goodness.
Yeah, so you still have to take them out and hang them up and have them all over the house. So yeah, washing machine and dryer and both in a laundry room.
Good. Well, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, but we finally finished the Big Finish Torchwood production, Believe. And this was, of course, with the original Torchwood cast.
And we didn't discover this
that's
until
true.
the end, so #spoiler, Arthur Darvill.
Right. Plays a part.
Yeah, now I want to go back and listen to it, because he's just in, like, the first episode or something, isn't
First
he?
two, right.
Or maybe first two?
I think he plays sort of the... this story is basically about... Oh, this is my words, not the Big Finish. It's sort of like Scientology they're investigating, but it's given another name.
It's the cult of Jack Barrowman, is what it is.
Well, ish. Yeah. I mean, it surrounds...
John Barrowman, sorry. I mixed up my guy.
Well, it surrounds, the guy who's sort of a L. Ron Hubbard figure who sort of makes this religion that... Or belief, whatever you want to call it. Organization, cult, whatever you want to call it. It's I am the beholder. About that, we're all meant to go... Humans are meant to live in the stars, and talks about that. And
Become immortal in that way,
yes,
sort of thing.
Yeah. And anyway, so Torchwood basically investigates, or at least Owen decides to investigate. And this was sort of an interesting story where Owen attempts to take the lead, and Jack actually steps to the side. I mean... Kind of a spoiler, but I mean, not really. Jack really isn't in until the last episode. I mean, he's in the beginning a little bit, but then it's sort of the regular Torchwood team, which is nice. It's nice to see the other, because you don't see them as often. It's just been, Jack and Gwen for most of Torchwood here in the past few years. But anyway, so you get the sort of the other. You get Owen and Tosh and Gwen, and obviously, and Yonto. But Jack doesn't tell a lot, and it's sort of interesting the way they tell the story, because sort of the last episode is Jack, and it's sort of catching up to all the episodes before, so he sort of flashbacks to, like, this is what happened in episode 1, and that's where Jack was, and episode 2, this is where Jack was, and so...
Which I found a little bit confusing, because it had been a while since we listened to the most recent episode before that, and so at the beginning I was like, what is happening? What is, So that was a little bit tricky just to listen to, but never mind. Interesting side note about Torchwood. What have we just discovered in our great country world outdoors, darling?
Apparently there is a bird or set of birds in our, I'll say front yard. Our yard is how many acres?
Well, the whole land is 40 acres, yeah.
But anyway, on our acreage, we have birds that know the Torchwood theme tune.
Yes. Yeah, I was sitting outside and thought I heard the Torchwood theme tune and thought, well, that's kind of strange. And then thought, I'm not going to mention it to my husband because he's going to think I'm cray-cray. And then, of course, did mention it to him, and he was like, yeah.
I heard that yesterday. The day before you told me that, I was like, that's interesting. But it's probably just me being weird, so. But yeah.
Apparently not. Apparently it's either both of us being weird or the birds being Torchwood fans. Mm-hmm. So
what did you think of Believe? Would you recommend it or no?
Yeah,
or is it a buy, a rent, or a skip?
Probably a rent.
Right. Not that you either have to buy Big Finish or not.
Yeah, I mean, that's
anyway.
not... But
Yes.
when you're looking at degrees, I enjoyed it mostly because the Torchwood team was back together.
Right.
And so that was nice. Although they don't, you've got Tosh and Owen together, but Gwen's off doing her own thing, Yonto's off doing his own thing. Captain Jack is...
It's basically Arrested Development Season 4.
Yes. Yeah, that's probably a pretty good analogy to it. So, and as it turns out, listening to the interviews afterwards, they were all in different places anyway, physically. John Barrowman was in Miami, and it sounded like Tosh and Owen, the people who play them, Byrne, and a name I kept listening to and still couldn't necessarily tie together with the way I've seen it. Seemed to be in the same place physically, and so yeah, it was an interesting.
Yeah, I thought, and this is going to sound weird since John Barrowman is usually multi-talented, I don't think he's a great, at least for this production, was not a great audio actor. I thought a lot of times it was hard to picture him reacting to the person. I know you're in a booth, you're alone, but I thought with the other ones, it definitely mixed a little bit more, whereas with Jack, it seemed like he was sort of just acting by himself instead of to the person.
Yeah, you could feel it in the audio. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But anyway, it was an interesting story. I don't know. Jack was kind of weird in it. But anyway, so yeah, if you're craving some, the original Torchwood gang, it's obviously...
By all means.
I forget how much I pay. It's nothing crazy expensive. It's Big Finish. It can only be so much.
$400, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, that's because the conversion is bad here between the sterling and the dollar.
Is true, yeah. It was only £2.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
$400.
Yes.
Hashtag thanks, Obama.
Yeah, well, that was a G7. All right. We're going to skip ahead, but because of what we're going to be talking about later, we were watching some extras. Oh, I guess I haven't mentioned. I did have some extra money, speaking of which, come my way.
Hashtag humble brag.
Exactly, right. And so I spent a little bit of it on a new Doctor Who purchase. I've talked about, we've been watching the complete Peter Capaldi Blu-ray, and so with a little extra change, normally I wouldn't buy because it is a little much, but whatever, I did buy the complete Matt Smith Blu-ray.
Yes.
So it was very exciting. There's actually a lot in it, which, I had the same reaction to the complete Peter Capaldi. There's a lot of extras, and even more extras than you think. And with the Matt Smith, you not only get more extras than you think, you also get, the adventure in space and time, the special they did during the 50th. You get the, what we've talked about previously, the Five-ish Doctors reboot, whatever, that one that we talked about previously in another episode. That was on there. So, it's actually a lot of cool stuff on there. Of course, it costs, so you're certainly getting what you pay for, but that's in a good way. So, yes, but we've been watching some of the extras on that. It just happened to be on the disc we were watching anyway, but it was about the companions. And then there's actually a lot of mini-sodes.
Yes.
That are just I was not aware of. So, if you're craving some extra 11th Doctor action and you have, a lot of money, if you're watching the complete Matt Smith, just know there's all these extra, they're only a minute or two, but there's all these extra 11th Doctor stories. One was with River, and then there's another with Amy, I think. And anyway, but it was all very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And we made a discovery in this as well, that the young lady who plays young Amelia Pond is actually Karen Gillian's cousin.
Yes. So.
Which, then when you, obviously you assume that they've cast it for some sort of resemblance. But once you know that, it's kind of cool. And you can see it more.
And I also think it's funny because she mentioned that we were watching a featurette called The Companions on the Matt Smith Blu-ray. But anyway, I think it's funny when you think about it because she was saying, really, I wasn't the first person to play Amy. It was my cousin. So really, she set who Amy was going to be for her to then get, who's actually hired to play the full-time role. So I thought that was interesting to think about that way.
Yeah, she talks about the line when they're trying to figure out what kind of food the 11th Doctor likes, which they ultimately figure out is fish fingers and custard, of course. And the young Amy Pond says, "You're funny." And she says it in this completely sarcastic, snarky sort of way. Mm-hmm. And that sort of informed then the way that Karen Gillian does it. Mm-hmm. Gilliam.
Yeah, I don't know if it's all Scottish. And it was interesting for this companions feature. It was actually they talk about almost all the New Who companions, at least to date, for the 11th Doctor, from 9 to 11.
Yeah.
No, they didn't talk about was Donna, which I thought was weird, by the way.
Although they do show, when they talk about all the companions together.
Yeah, Journey's End.
Yeah.
But they don't, they seem to do a feature on everyone except Donna, which I thought was weird. But anyway.
Yeah.
Anything new you got from that I thought was interesting? They managed to get everyone interviewed, of course, except Catherine Tate, because they didn't talk about it. Of course, they didn't get
Billy Piper.
Probably Billy Piper, but everyone else they seemed to. They had John Barrowman, they had Freema.
They didn't. They also didn't have.
Well, they didn't have Liz, but she may have been
River Song.
Right, that's true. They did talk about it a little bit.
But they did. Yeah, but it was interesting to see them talking about the companions and their take.
Even Arthur was there talking about Rory. I was going
to say, I think Rory might have been the most interesting one with them talking about this idea that his job is to keep Amy safe, and he rises to that challenge. His companion probably has the most obvious story arc, character arc of the growth that he goes through.
Yeah, I think the way they phrased it, in order for him to be with Amy, he has to be on the TARDIS. So then he has to force himself to be someone who belongs on the TARDIS, quote unquote belongs, So.
Yeah, and has to step up, and it changes him. Mm-hmm. But also, I think, makes him the man that Amy loves.
Right, and the one she chooses to be with at the end.
Absolutely. And over and over and over again, he has all of those sort of self-doubt moments, where he's eavesdropping, and Amy's talking about the guy that, she will always fight for, and he thinks she's talking about the Doctor until she gets to the end, and things like that. So, yeah, interesting.
Cool. I've been looking through some Torchwood comics, or a volume of graphic novels I got, and then some Doctor Who comics as well. So, I won't go into them now, but so if you're on Goodreads, it's a good website to talk about book reviews and what you're reading. I'm on there. And you can easily find me, I think. And if not, just tweet me at NC Public Servant. I can tell you where my links are. I read a recent, I don't know when it was actually published, recent to me, Torchwood's comic book series. It was actually written by John Barrowman and his sister Carol. Was not great, in my opinion, but that was just my opinion. But I don't know if anyone knows any good Doctor Who and or Torchwood comics, particular issues or anything that you'd recommend, let me know. I'm more than happy to do it that way. And if folks want to talk to you about any other Doctor Who stuff we've talked about, darling, where can they reach you?
They can find me at One Phoenix Theater.
On Twitter.
On Twitter, yes. Yeah. And finally, since it's June.
That's right.
June is busting out all over, yo.
Yep. And we're not saying what year, so we don't want to date ourselves.
Good point.
It could be any June.
Yes, it could be any June in time or space. Right. True story.
Could be Space June.
Could be Space June. Could be Moon June.
That's true.
Moon June. I'm going to say that a few more times. Moon June. We got our next Mr. Man, Dr. Six.
Yes.
Which is so exciting.
Yeah, it was interesting. Six is not my favorite Doctor, and then featured Perry, which I don't think is not your favorite companion. And so, but nevertheless, it was still a cute story.
Yes, and we tend to, because we're hideously dorky,
right. We
tend to sit down and read it aloud together.
Yes.
And
now, you are the director, obviously, in many ways. But I am proud of myself. I did have a voice directing moment with you.
He had several voice directing. He always, I read the whole story and he reads what the doctor says.
Well, all the male doctors I read.
Oh, right. Okay. So, well, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
We'll see how that goes.
When Dr. 13th comes
Yes.
out, it will not,
Thank you, darling. You're going to let me step up to the plate. You're so kind. But yes, while I was reading Perry, Phillip said, you need to be more American.
Well, I said, hand quote, more American.
Yes, and then when I went more American, he responded with...
You got to be high, pitchier, whinier.
Yeah. So, thanks for that direction.
After that, she did a perfect parry.
Darling.
Now, Mike Colin Baker's rubbish. That's all right. But anyway, I was trying to get his sort of... Because he's whiny, too, in his own way. But he's sort of that egotistical, petulant, bragging, I'm smarter than you, and shut up, and all this sort of stuff. But I don't know how to do that, so anyway.
He doesn't know how to do it with a British accent, is what he's actually saying. The rest of it, a lot of times he's got down pat. All right. If you are interested generally in skipping over the banter, this is where we're going to start talking about the real thing. Yeah? Shall we do that, my love?
Sure.
So, like the story Moby Dick, Doctor Who fans are forever chasing the great white whale of lost Doctor Who episodes. These are mostly second Doctor serials, along with first Doctor stories as well. And it wasn't until 2013 that all 6 episodes of the second Doctor serial, The Enemy of the World, were made complete, thanks to a find in Nigeria. We'll be talking about the restored version of this story, featuring Patrick Troughton playing both the second Doctor and would-be world ruler Salamander.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting. And I don't have all the facts in front of me, but I think there was a DVD issued either 2013 or 2014. I can't remember when. But it's sort of just like, hey, we got everything, here it is, boom. What I bought recently was sort of the reissue, and this was the restored version, has a bunch of extras on it, and I think it came out just this year. If not this year, it was the end of last year, but it was fairly recent, so that's what we watched. So this was sort of the restored version, which I think actually shows a lot, that it is, a lot went into it, as well as a bunch of extras. So, but overall, just talking about the story in and of itself, what'd you think of the serial, the 6-part serial, The Enemy of the World?
Overall, I thought it was a good story. It was a little bit busy, because you've sort of got is Salamander a good guy or a bad guy? We need to find the proof that. Yes. And then, towards the end, and by the way, he has a bunch of people trapped underground making earthquakes for him, and they are prisoners.
Right.
And so I almost wanted them to open with that, so that we understood from the get-go what was happening and how it was working and things like that. It felt a little bit tacked on.
Watching some of the extras, and I guess they're interviewing the director, who I know is super famous in Doctor Who, but his name... Barry, I know he's super famous in Doctor Who because he took over as like showrunner. But anyway, I apologize, I'm forgetting the name. But anyway, they were talking to the director of this serial, and the way he was saying it was kind of like they had written, I guess, the first or second episode script, and the rest were outlines. And I think it shows. I think it goes like great first episode and maybe even second episode. Then it kind of drags a little bit. And there's some random stuff, like the kitchen scene, which is not bad, but it's random, with the cook and everything.
Yes,
it's
yeah,
sort of like,
there was filler.
Yeah.
The cook is very much like the guy from Macbeth, the porter, knock, knock, knock. Mm-hmm. He's just there being comedic.
Right.
And doesn't move the story along. And they also talked about sort of restrictions, like the first scene was originally written to be on this crowded beach. And because they couldn't get
a crowd,
they had to rewrite it and change the way it went and all of those sorts of things. So, yeah, it sounds as if it were a little bit hodgepodge, and then it comes across that way a little bit as well.
But I think the ending is good, but it's super rushed. I think you could have taken episode 6, stretched that, and then sort of, instead of having the sort of lazy... And I'm not saying it's all bad.
Yeah, because also then one of the good guys turns out to be one of the bad guys. Yeah. And that's not
Twist.
Even dealt with at all, really. It's just like, he's a bad guy now.
And then boom.
Nobody needs proof of that.
And dead.
And dead, yeah. So Yeah, it just felt hodgepodgey. There was a whole lot going on that I think maybe didn't need to be going on.
So, yeah, but I thought it was interesting. I thought, like, the first episode was sort of epic. I know it's an overword use, but, I mean, you have a hovercraft, you have a helicopter, you have a shootout. I mean, like, there's a lot going on that you don't normally see in Doctor Who in that first episode. So I thought it was really, like, it was a strong sort of way to start off. But it sort of goes with there.
And then it gets a little meandering.
Yeah, it does. And then the restoration, as far as the quality, I mean, I'll talk about that later. So let's actually talk about what really brought this to my attention, or at least I think you would be, especially from your background, would be interesting to talk about. So Patrick Troughton, of course, plays two roles.
Yes.
Plays the second Doctor, and he plays Salamander.
Yes.
So what did you sort of think of that? Of you've seen the second Doctor before, but having seen Patrick show, or do you think there was range, but how did you think he played? Because as someone pointed out in the extras, he's actually playing three parts. He's playing the Doctor, he's playing Salamander, and he's playing the Doctor playing Salamander.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I thought there was good range there. A lot of good range. And it didn't occur to me until they talk about it in the extras about cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
Salamander is technically a Mexican character. And they even talk about browning him up, although, it's a black and white. So, I think that if it had been in color and I had seen that would have given me more pause at the time. But it didn't really occur to me while it was happening that he was browning up, again, because it was in black and white. And I didn't notice. Yeah,
he's a bit more, what's the term, swarthier looking. But that's just, okay. I thought that was just sort of differentiating him from being the Doctor.
Yeah, in terms of the swarthiness, I thought it was making him more political and doing something, the second Doctor's hair is so Three Stooges anyway. That, changing it into a bit of a coif didn't...
And the accent isn't... it's interesting, and I can't place what it'd be. It's not Mexican, certainly, but I don't know what it is. Not that I'm a Mexican expert, but... I don't know, but it sounded different. I didn't really... couldn't place what it was.
Yeah, the accent sounded foreign from what the Doctor was. But, yeah, it wasn't necessarily specific to something. So, yeah. But, yes, I thought it showed a nice range, and I found it really interesting. Where I didn't always notice a difference was that third character of the Doctor playing Salamander. You expect to see sort of peaks of the Doctor within, and I didn't necessarily. And that's not a critique, just an observation.
Because they did show him trying to master the accent. He's like, I'm going to need a couple of weeks. They're like, you got 5 minutes. And he's like, oh, my friend, he's trying to get it down.
Nice, yeah. But then, there's a scene with the good guy who turns out to be a bad guy and the Doctor playing Salamander, and we don't know.
Yeah, because I actually thought it was Salamander.
Until the end of it, that it's actually the Doctor, and I think being able to see some of those clues might have been useful. Some sort of surprise that, he's a bad guy, or, something, some sort of tells, I guess, that we didn't get.
I did tweet earlier that we'd be talking about this, and we got a tweet from @Corey, LLAP, I'm going to assume that's Live Long and Prosper. Yes, Charles Elrod. And he said, basically, I bought the DVD a few months back. I really enjoyed this one. I think Patrick Troughton is the greatest actor to play the Doctor in the classic series. He really gets to show that off in this story. So, yeah, it's an interest, because the second Doctor is a interesting character in and of himself, the way he plays it. And I've probably said this before, where he's sort of have this sort of childlike, when he jumps into the ocean in the beginning of episode.
Gets down into his skivvies and jumps into the ocean. Which apparently he regretted because it was cold. But there you go.
And it was his idea to do that, too. It wasn't even in the script. But anyway, he also has this sort of, spastic, frustrated, show me proof, I need proof, I don't know, this sort of way he get easily, not in a bad way, but easily frustrated or,
wound up easily, yeah.
So, but I think that second Doctor is an interesting character, compared to the first, because at that point, that's all you could compare it to. But then also, I think, looking at Salamander, again, that's a weird name. Can we talk about that? I don't know why they named the character Salamander.
No, it is very strange.
But anyway, certainly, that can't be Mexican.
I don't know.
But anyway, I don't know any senior Salamanders. But anyway, but I think it is an interesting character. The way he plays him is very it works. Like, you know, it is a different character, obviously.
Very, very clearly. Yeah. And I agree. I think it was a great acting job. And especially because it's relatively clear to me that the second Doctor is very much a character, whereas in some of the other classic Doctors, you don't get the impression they are.
So they're sort of playing
themselves, right.
Like Bill Hartnell, you're thinking.
Yes, and who's the one that you're always talking about? Is one of the Bakers.
Tom Baker.
Yeah,
Tom Baker is the Doctor. Tom Baker is the Doctor. Tom Baker.
Yeah, and so there's no range necessarily there. So you really get to see that with Patrick Troughton, and I enjoyed that. Even,
you know, this is getting a couple layers, but even when Patrick Troughton playing Salamander, who's having to act. In other words, when we discover it underground, you know, when he goes into the Batcave, when Salamander has to act with this other group of people, I think it's interesting because, you know, we've sort of established that, man, we don't like Salamander. He's like this, he's killing people, he's conniving. Now he has to go pretend to be sort of the savior of this underground people he's been, you know, unknowing to them, keeping them hostage, where he has to be like, oh, it's all dangerous out there, you know, and all that.
Radiation, everybody will die.
Yeah, and so that's sort of another layer of acting where he has to then act like that.
Yeah, there's a lot in this for Patrick Troughton to sink his teeth into, and I think that he quite enjoyed that.
Yeah, so. I'm sure, you know, doing this for so long, because I think every, you know, Doctors, even though he's only the second one, but looking at all of them, they only tend to last, you know, 2 to 3 years, and I think it's probably a fun part, but it probably does get maybe a bit tiring after a while, you know, because there's only so much sometimes. And that's not a critique. It's just after 3 years of playing the same part. But I'm sure, you know, that if you get a chance to breathe every now and then doing something else, it probably keeps you there longer. So.
Yeah, keeps things fresh. And this is particularly, I think his performance is particularly interesting in light of when we were looking at some of the extras and his son is talking about Patrick Troughton's absolute disdain.
Oh, that was so weird.
For live theater.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Shouting in the evening.
Yeah, shouting in the nighttime or something like that. I mean, just didn't do stage work at all. Which is relatively unusual, particularly in England. Most people get their start on the boards.
Especially this time in the 60s, I think.
But even now, to have that sort of range, you would expect someone with stage experience who has played a variety of characters in short succession.
And I wonder, because one thing, not to get off on a tangent, one thing his son talked about, I forget which son it was, what was his name, but anyway, it was how nervous his father was, Patrick was. That Pat Troughton was just a bundle of nerves before every performance. That was just the way he was. So I think maybe he might not be good for the theater because, you know, it's live. You mess up. Maybe he felt more relaxed with television because... And of course, even then, back then, of course, they couldn't do many edits or do-overs. And he said, I think there was a cool thing he said that he often because I think the questioner asked, when can you see your father in the second Doctor? And he's like, there's these coughs or the let me see, which is so second Doctor. And that's him trying to remember his lines. Sort of like, well, and let me
or
see
looking
here.
up.
Yeah, looking up, he
those
said.
sorts of things. Yeah, which is always, interesting. But I don't think you see it as much in Salamander.
Right, no.
So, and again, maybe it's a briefer time period, but, interesting.
I thought it was funny when you were saying how much Pat Troughton is working in this. Jamie and Victoria, Fraser and Deborah got us episode off. They were on holiday. So I was watching one episode. I think it was 4. I'm like, are they even in this?
Yeah,
and they show up like at last 5 minutes. I'm
at one point we were like, so where are they? And apparently on holiday somewhere. So there you go.
Cool. But yeah, it was interesting performances. Anything else as far as the actual story? I mean, it's an interesting story set in the far-flung future of 2018.
Yes, which is, it wasn't quite 2018 yet, was it? Because there was the thing on the helicopter that was like, this needs to be
It was December 31st. Yeah, okay. So it could have been 2017, but it was an expiration registration for the helicopter of like December 31st, 2018.
Yeah, which is lots of fun and a little bit terrifying in terms of its prescience. I mean, I don't think that there are any world leaders, in this country keeping people underground.
Right. Or creating volcanoes.
No, but
Right.
certainly capitalizing.
Or earthquakes,
It's a hypothetical world we live in.
But it's very, I don't want to say, I was going to say it's pretty dystopian for Doctor Who. Maybe that's not true. Of course, it's to date, this is 1967? That's off the top of my head, so I might be wrong. But anyway, so, because this is, I guess with 67, that would have been a long time ahead, 2018, trying to picture that in your head. Of course, it's weird to live in 2018 now. But anyway, that this sort of things were, it was overpopulation or, starvation or whatever. And you sort of have Salamander who's sort of providing for the people and
yes, has figured out how to grow crops quickly and get them harvested and has figured out how to utilize the sun in a way that...
Yeah, that was, I guess, what threw me off. And I don't know, maybe if I wasn't paying attention or maybe they just, I don't know if it's my fault or the story's fault. I thought like there was going to be like a sun machine. That's how he was using it to make
that would need to
volcanoes
be
happen.
Yeah.
So like the sun was shining where he wants it, but not where he doesn't want it. Instead, like somehow the people underground are showing earthquakes. It wasn't ever clear how they were doing that, but whatever, I guess. So
yeah. Good times.
Yeah.
Good times.
But a fascist dictator, it's on Earth, right, of the future, quote unquote, though it's weird now because it's the present day, but it's sort of an interesting storyline because, the whole propaganda thing, everyone likes him except for the people who are the resistance fighters and it's sort of, that was an interesting story. I mean, pretty, I'm not saying Doctor Who doesn't do complex, but it's not the monsters are trying to attack us because we're all locked into this room.
Yes, and I sort of expected him to turn out to be a future, from the future or something that he had these controls that came from the future or from a different planet or things like that. And it's not. It's just, he's just a dreadful human being.
Right. And then and then again, the reveal, spoilers, whatever. When, I can't remember the guy's name, turns out to be a bad guy who we've thought have been sort of a lead resistance fighter, and you're like, wow. But it makes sense. It's a good story. You just could have fleshed it out a little bit.
Yeah, could have explored that
But
more.
I did like that. It's an interesting twist. You don't normally get twists in a classic Doctor Who all the time. So
Yeah.
So it's a pretty mature story. As much as, it is. So, as far as the restoration and the extras, we kind of talked a little bit about it, but the restoration I really noticed because, it's black and white, but it's more depth, like literal depth. Like, I can see depth than I'm used to seeing in Doctor Who, and maybe it's just the versions I have, but it's like watching the old, of course here in America, what we normally see in black and white reruns here, at least in these years, would be
Andy Griffith.
Thank you. I was trying to figure out what it would be. And because you couldn't sort of see the depth of the room, because it was funny because they're episode 1 when they're in an actual house. It is almost like they're in a sitcom, like Leave It to Beaver or something.
No, absolutely.
It's like weird just to be the doctor in a sitcom, but anyway. Just showing it. But anyway, I think the restoration shows for those who like, visual restorations. I think, it's worth the quality. If you don't have the latest DVD and you're a hardcore Doctor Who fan, I think it's worth the investment because it does show off.
Yeah, and to slide right into talking about the extras, one of the extras bits talks about that restoration process. And when they found the original tapes, they had been cut in places to put commercial breaks in and things like that. And then, sticky taped together, sellotaped together, which is not really great for film. And so they were having to undo it and clean it and put it back together. And all of that sort of work that went into it was really quite interesting.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed learning about that.
Mm-hmm. And the extras are pretty cool. I don't have this in front of me. I'm going to remember. But the extras were cool. They had a sort of memorial for Deborah Watling. Probably getting her name wrong, but anyway, the actress who plays Victoria, I thought was really interesting because she just passed away a few years ago, apparently from lung cancer. And so you had her brother, who's an MP, apparently. So that was pretty cool because he has an acting background. Of course, her father being twice in Doctor Who in the Yeti stories. Not that he's in the extras, but it's interesting to talk about that whole family because her and her younger sister's on there talking about it too.
And running a sort of family theater that they have.
Bought this theater and just ran the summer stock there or whatever.
And then they could have jobs.
Yeah, and then you have sort of Fraser Hines, of course, playing Jamie, talking about her a lot. And then a lot of the Doctor Who alum, Colin Baker, I don't know the connection, but he's on there, the Sixth Doctor. And then you had...
he just showed up and said, I hear you're doing something about the Doctor. I'm here for it.
And then I can't remember her name, but the lady who played Polly, which was a first and then second Doctor companion. So, but anyway, and then Louise Jameson, who plays Leela, the fourth Doctor's companion, which you would think, other than being companions, I don't know how they're related, but apparently they grew up together in the same grade school or something. So.
Well, and again, the British theater scene is a relatively small one, so people tend to run into each other.
And I guess they were of similar ages, all of them. So,
yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting, that part. And then had this sort of little quirky featurette with Toby, I can't remember his last name, sort of going around talking to random folks.
Yeah, that was kind of weird.
Yeah,
I mean,
cool,
I enjoyed the interviews and things. It got a little exploitative.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, overall, really interesting and nice.
Mm-hmm. Sure, cool.
All right, so this time we're going to jump into the TARDIS library and go into the future.
That's right. Time moves in many directions. And so for the TARDIS library this time, we're going to be talking about the 11th Doctor, since we're talking about main actors playing two parts, and the hero and the villain. And so we're going to be talking about the 11th Doctor playing two parts in Nightmare in Silver, which first premiered way back in 11 May 2013. Darling, would you like to read the synopsis from TARDIS.wiki?
I would love to. So, the 11th Doctor takes his companion, Clara Oswald, and her wards, Angie and Artie, to the biggest amusement park, Hedgewick's World of Wonders. The theme park is empty, occupied by a punishment platoon and a lone impresario with empty Cybermen shells as exhibits. The Doctor decides to stay a while, however, to investigate strange insect creatures that are roaming the park. But these insects are really machines seeking to convert the life forms on Hedgewick's world into the newest generation of the ever-upgrading menace.
Delete.
Yeah, another Cyberman episode. Yeah.
So concentrating on the topic for a moment. So Matt Smith plays, obviously, the 11th Doctor, and he also sort of gets cyber-zapped and becomes the cyber planner as well. And so there's sort of two ways they show this. There's one where he sort of has the half of his face is sort of Borgified, cyberfied. And so he sort of, turns around playing the two different parts. And they have this other one where they're sort of, I guess, in the Doctor's mind. And then you sort of have double Matt Smiths, one being the 11th and the one being the cyber planner talking to each other. So that's sort of two mediums of how to show those characters. So
because it is one body.
Exactly. So how did you think of Matt Smith's performance in this?
I mean, I love Matt Smith. I think he has such a fantastic physicality to him that's reminiscent of Jerry Lewis without being obnoxious. Mm-hmm. Because I do find Jerry Lewis quite obnoxious, but Matt Smith, I think, pulls it off really well. This doesn't give him a chance to show off much range. This gives him a lot of chance to show off comedic timing. It gives him a lot of chance to show off his physicality. There was even a moment where I assumed he was taking in Jack Nicholson from The Shining, but it's not a big range. It's not two violently different characters.
Because I think with this one, the way I explain it to myself is that the cyber planner is working within the 11th Doctor, so it's the 11th Doctor's mannerisms and voice and way of thinking, but with the cyber planner pulling the strings. And so instead of it being like a salamander whole character, It's still the 11th Doctor. The way he moves is still the same as the 11th Doctor. The way he talks, but it's sort of this other personality within the body.
Yes, yeah, and none of the things I was saying were meant to be critiques at all. He does a fantastic job. It's just completely different to what Patrick Troughton does.
But I, from both a actor standpoint and I assume a directing standpoint, and maybe even producing, because there's a lot of special effects here, I thought what they did well was translating who was who.
Yes.
Because honestly, like you said, when it's the two Matts, it's obvious, because you can see one's on the left, one's on the right, and you can tell which one's which. But when it's just the same body, and, the half the face, the way he turns around, you have to figure out who's who, and that can kind of be silly for a certain point. And there's some kind of effects to be a little like, choon, choon, let you know he's churning around. But I think he can still masters the way both the camera and the director is doing it, and both everything else. You're able to tell when he's being the doc. I mean, except for when he's playing around, you can't. But that's part of the story of when sometimes it's being confusing on purpose. But when it's not trying to fool you, you can tell who's being who.
Yes, and to be honest, there is at least as much skill in this as what Patrick Troughton was doing, because Patrick Troughton could take, they're so different. So he's got lots of room with that, whereas Matt Smith has to be much subtler and more nuanced with it. And like I say, he's just so brilliant at physical comedy. He's just so lanky and floppy anyway. In fact, I forget it when we're watching The Crown. I forget about how great Matt Smith is physically, because he's able to turn it off and be relatively normal in The Crown. But his physicality is just a joy to watch.
Because I think the interesting thing when the Cyberplaner's first taking over, but maybe throughout the whole thing, he sort of does like the 11th Doctor on steroids, because he's sort of like zooming around the room, arms moving wildly around, which is all 11th Doctor, but he's like taking it to 11.
Yeah.
Of the way that he sort of, takes the room, when he sort of dances across the TARDIS sometimes, but, and, everything. And so he was super floppy. But I also thought it was interesting because the Cyberplaner has to sort of absorb all that he has with the Doctor, which means he has to go through some of the regenerations.
Yes. So we get to see
Matt Smith doing a little Chris Eccleston and doing a little David Tennant, which is okay. It's cool. Matt Smith, I'm saying he did a good Eccleston and okay Tennant.
Yes. Yeah, I'd forgotten. He picks up the catchphrases and things like that, which is fun. It's a lot of fun to watch.
Right.
He does it beautifully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I thought it was an interesting story. It's kind of a new look for the Cybermen, which is, as we talked about last week, they're always updating and upgrading. So even I was thinking to myself, New Who, I'm sure they've all been the same, but no, this episode they're actually pretty different than, not a little different, not crazy different from what we've seen before in New Who, but they're a little different. They look different, so it was very interesting, and they have literally upgraded and can apparently move at warp speed and stuff. So
cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are we going to talk about next week?
Well, next week, I thought we would sort of talk about two things in one, because it's bigger on the inside in the show. We're going to talk about something we've mentioned a lot that you've been aching to see, darling.
Okay.
And we're going to use it as a jumping point to talk about the Daleks. So we've talked Cybermen, we're going to talk about the Daleks. How are we going to talk about the Daleks? We're going to be talking about Doctor Who and the Daleks, starring Peter Cushing as the Doctor.
Oh, the Doctor who shall not be named.
Yes. So actually, we're going to have a little comedic run at this, because we're not going to watch the movie straight. We're going to watch the Riff Tracks version.
Oh, how fun! Yay!
So
I like the Riff Track versions.
So we're going to be watching that, and then
and how are we going to do that?
Well, Amazon.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, which was how we're watching Sarah Jane Adventures.
Yes. So. It's just that last time we saw the Riff Track, we had to actually go to the cinema theater for it. Yeah.
So yeah, that'll be next week.
Exciting.
Well, until then, darling, you're my favorite character in all of time and space.
And you're my favorite weirdo.
This is BBC Television.